All right. Oh, let's get started. All of this stuff. Hey, I need a haircut. This is won't be too long in North Carolina. I'll be able to get a haircut. So welcome, folks. I'm glad you joined us. This is our distancing together. It's an opportunity for us to come together, yet remain a safe distance apart. So the concept is also set up that we're at 8 o'clock in the evening, so a person can have beverage at hand. I happen to have water in my lily mug, but maybe later I'll have a little something else. But if you've got a glass of wine or something, by all means, that's just sit back and we'll play around here for a little bit. What I plan to do is I'm going to go through about 10 minutes or so, and then maybe 15. And if there's questions, we can start doing questions and answers about things. We've got a good sized group. Sometimes we'll open up all of the folks so everybody can talk, but with this size group, I'm a little more resistant just because it's too easy to step over each other. So I'll tell you what we're going to do is we'll use our plan B or plan A with this size group is down under questions and answers. If you have questions, please type those, and Catherine will keep an eye on those, and I'll try to keep an eye on those as well, and we'll answer those as quickly as we have a gap to do that. I think, Catherine, is there anything else I'm missing for this one? We may have lost my trusted Catherine.
I don't think so. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you now. This is great. Okay. So again, questions and answers, please type down there at the Q&A down toward the bottom if you have any questions. I'm going to just kick off here and get back to this spot here and do a screen share with a couple of, and I'm not going to run through a whole PowerPoint presentation here, but I do have a couple of slides from presentations I've done back through the years, and so I thought we could play around with just a couple of these concepts. I like to point out that the advantages and cautions of using humor in the classroom. And I will tell you, of all the presentations I've done through the years, humor is one of my least favorite because everybody expects you to be hilarious all the time. And, you know, quite frankly, that's not what this one's about. We're talking about humor, and I'll try to, we'll try to have some fun if we can along the way too. One introduction I got one time, I will admit, it was somebody about 10 years older than me. It was a male. He had blondish hair. And when he introduced me, he said, "Todd is like the funniest person around. You're going to laugh your butts off. He is just hilarious." And he says, "Okay, everybody, here's Todd." And I stepped up and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful. What am I supposed to do? Only thing I could think of is I said, "Well, thank you very much." Oh, and the other thing was he said, "This is like, Todd's like Robin Williams with a PhD. That's how he introduced me, Robin Williams with a PhD. And so after he introduced me, I turned to him and I said, "Thank you, Terry. I really appreciate it." I said, "I've always thought of you as Gary Busey with a master's." Now, it got a good joke or good laugh, but it's one of those issues that I'm going to talk about as we come through here. It got a good laugh for a certain group of individuals who knew who Gary Busey was, understood what I was going for, and, tolerated the combination or the reference I was making there. Sorry, I couldn't even think of that one. So let's roll through and let's just see a couple of the concepts when we use humor in the classroom. Now, one of the things you do run into quite frequently is the concept of, does humor and work go together? It's the concept of we are here to work, not to joke around. And the issue that we have to be careful of here is that you can have fun and get a lot of work done, but people have to understand what's happening. So I will say, if you do tend to have lots of fun, it's really important to point out the work that's being done or has been done. And if you don't, a lot of times, and I've actually had people who have left my workshops and said, "Wow, that was hilarious, and we had so much fun, but we didn't get through a whole lot of content." And then once I show the content we went through, they'll say, "Oh, I guess it was a lot." But the point is, people will sometimes equate having fun with not getting work done. So we have to be very careful. Oftentimes things like creativity and having fun are not even encouraged in work types of situations. And the other part is we just have to be careful because humor can be difficult and you have to be cautious of impact, which I'm going to be talking about quite a bit here in just a moment. Again, just to run through these things very quickly. Types of humor that typically tend to be kind of beneficial and can work well. Twists on class material, like this little slide I have up here. What group projects are supposed to teach you and what group projects actually taught me. Using things that can twist so it kind of takes the words into a new direction. Those can be really funny. Funny stories. So Stories typically will have funny, are considered to be funny when there'll be a twist on words, have something at the end you weren't expecting. Quick comments can be funny depending on how you do those. Self-disparaging things. Research talks a lot about self-disparaging. We have to be careful with self-disparaging because you don't want to discredit yourself. And so you do have to be very careful with self-disparaging. And spontaneous often can be funny too. And we'll play around with that a little bit as well. Things that they don't look too rehearsed. In fact, the research shows that when students in a classroom situation, when students feel like you're trying too hard, canned jokes and trying to force jokes, they tend not to like it as much. Now, some of the benefits that's out there with respect to humor. It can build group cohesion. So we often will see that as people will have, as Ian had pointed out there, and he put it in his question and answers, kind of inside jokes. You can start to get this cohesion. You do have to be careful because of in-group, out-group. We don't want to make people feel like they're outside the group. But if the whole group feels like it has some cohesion, that's good. I've seen faculty members who will have students take turns bringing jokes and humorous things in. If students ever bring jokes and humorous things into your classroom, you always preview it first. Please don't ever let anybody show something in your class without seeing exactly what it is they're going to do. It can make it easier to talk to one another. Sometimes you can use humor to soften criticism, but again, you got to be very careful how you use it. But sometimes you can do that. But point is, it can be used to soften criticism. Lots of research and lots of discussion about facilitating relaxation and reducing stress. So sometimes, again, you can use the humor to defuse situations. And I'll go on to the rest, but you have to be very careful with this. I was actually working with a group from Switzerland, a group known for their humor, of course. And the concept there was we were working with them, and we got into a situation. We were hosting a conference in Switzerland. The individuals from Switzerland who were on the committee, things started to get tense about how we were going to handle something. And I then told a joke or kind of made light of the situation. And when I did that, the issue was very quickly, two of the people got up and walked right out of the room. And they walked out because they felt like nobody was taking this seriously. And as soon as not nobody, me, as soon as I started to joke about it, they said, you're not taking it seriously. I was trying to diffuse the situation. And that was a case where I made a mistake because of cultural differences. And then I found out the Swiss were actually, the people we were working with were hilarious, but never while working, this particular group. So you do have to be careful with this, how it's perceived. It can facilitate learning and recall, which I'll talk specifically about in just a minute. Jokes can help, or humor can actually help cue memories and can actually help stimulating parts of the brain that will help you with dopamine and memory and interest levels. And it can help with attention. Again, it can help because of different neurotransmitters that happen when you're actually laughing and having fun. So the concept here is it can do lots of good things. Types of humor that we know out of the gate do not work well. Number one is sarcasm, and you just would feel like you wouldn't have to mention this, but I have 3 daughters, and all 3 are either in college or just finishing college right now, and every one of them have brought me examples of faculty members using sarcasm, and it's just really, really not a good thing to ever do. Anything that denigrates, mocks, or picks on individuals or groups, it's just wrong anyway, but students will pick up on it quickly and do not like those. I was just reading an article where a faculty member actually made a joke that included the Holocaust. And so you just have to be really, really careful with these things, because there are things that are not funny and things that, again, will result in bad reactions from students. So we just have to be careful. Racial, political, sexually based humor, research shows over and over again that those are just not funny, not interesting things to joke around about. And there's some really interesting research I've been playing around looking for. And I just found this 2018 article that's cited here, gender differences in humors. Which types of words are funny or for males versus females? And it was very interesting, the types of words that sometimes males will find very funny, females tend not to find funny, and vice versa. So things, again, we have to kind of be mindful of. Some of the things with respect to humor, It does show research again shows positive correlations with student evaluations. Actually, it's really interesting. It's 1 to 2 times per class period students like to have humor inserted. It's not constant. And I'm going to tell you again, and we're going to talk about it just a second too, but it's very specifically about the content. It helps to facilitate learning, but not just being funny. Just being funny will entertain people, but that doesn't actually help learning. But positive correlations with student evaluations when appropriate and the right amount of humor is used. Overuse again, valuations go down. Sarcasm is consistently related to lower teaching evaluations by students. And also humor and credibility are positively associated. Oftentimes, if you can quickly make jokes about things, people see you as knowing the material better than if you don't. So it can actually help with credibility. I mentioned this before about neurotransmitters. Humor can activate, and I am showing these as slides too, by the way. Anybody who wants these slides can have them at the end of this. So I put this material down so that you can have it if you'd like it. But humor will activate the release of dopamine. And dopamine is really, really important with memory, just a huge aspect. And what it also does, and this I've blown this up for you, is it helps with respect to storytelling, because oftentimes a lot of humor that people use are related to stories or related to in context. And context and stories really helps the learning process. Not only do you get the dopamine level burst there, cortex activity, when people are processing different facts or different areas of the brain at the same time, that helps. Mirrors or mirror neurons can kick in, and that's basically as a person's telling a joke or telling a story, you can understand or get better perspective or at least empathy. You understand their position, so that can help you later with memory. And this neural coupling, which kind of can help with facilitating recall of information by pulling things together. The coupling is you tie certain pieces of humor to certain learned facts. And I've used humor in my psych classes going back to the mid-1980s, and I can tell you over and over and over again, there are times when on exams I'll say, remember the joke about, tell me the principle involved, and the students were very good at that. So just kind of almost done with this. I wanted to go through this very quickly so we could talk more. I found this study that was looking at perceptions of humor in a pharmacy classroom. And again, students reported preference for relevant humor. That's what I mentioned before. It has to pertain to the content. Self-deprecating humor at 1 or 2 instances per hour. Again, you're not trying to discredit yourself. It's just if you're talking about yourself in a way that you can make fun of, you show a humanizing side. And the students in that particular study reported improvements in accessibility in terms of meeting with and talking to the faculty member for learning and interest and attention, all of those things. Now, I also just want to point out quickly about the dangers of using humor in the classroom. So right now, I've used humor multiple times in workshops of saying things like, if you want to get students' attention, you could do multiple things. You could blow a train whistle, you could use a tambourine, you could use a cowbell, because sometimes all class needs is, and a big chunk of the class would report, or a big chunk of the workshop will say more cowbell. But here's the deal. Of the number of people who say more cowbell, and this is just an indication of getting old, it turns out that now only about 1/3 of faculty members even know the reference to more cowbell. It's a Saturday Night Live skit. 2/3 of the group doesn't know it. And if they don't know the reference to it, then they don't feel like they're part of the club. It doesn't help facilitate memory. It doesn't help stimulate dopamine release. None of those things happen. So that's where we have to be really careful. And there's other things we're going to talk about in just a minute of concern. But before we even get there, what I wanted to do real quickly is stop sharing here and see. Catherine, can we see if you can get to your memes?
Yep, hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you. I can actually hear you very well.
All right, great. Let me make sure.
And I'd ask Catherine to take a quick look at this because she's got a little meme generator that she has used in the medical school.
Well, so this isn't exactly the meme generator. Can you see my
Oh,
screen now? I just want to make sure.
yep, I can see it fine. Yep.
So part of quizzes, one of the things like within the med school, if quizzes, if you are not familiar with it, it's kind of akin to Kahoot, and it allows for like asynchronous activities of Kahoot or quizzing. And so then you can go back and see how you're doing against your class. But one of the fun things that it does, and I think the students actually were shocked when they used it for the first time, was that you can create a custom meme. So you can go in and create your own meme set here. I don't have one created, but you can change and make your own. And you can make correct memes. So you could do one for like, you can take pictures of yourself. So one of the faculty members that I worked with actually took pictures of himself, like doing like, you know, poses of like thumbs up and things like that. And for the correct memes, and then you can do incorrect memes. So then when they get the question correct or incorrect, they actually see your face pop up, which shocked many of the students, but they also were they're surprised, but it made them laugh, and they commented about it, how they thought it was fun that they actually took the time to go in and make your own memes. So if you're in quizzes, it's just over here on the left hand side to create your own, and all you would do is upload your image and then you can type in over it. So whatever image you happen to have, then you can do that. You can also do a quick Googles and find, it gives you the step-by-step right here from quizzes and their blog on how to make your custom memes. So just so if you wanted to, it's there, and fun.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. All right. So basically, that takes care of most of what I had listed for the positive side of using humor in a classroom or humor in learning. Now, some of the negative things we have to be a little bit careful of is, again, specific groups being left out. So if we do have something like I make a joke about more cowbell, and there's other people who don't get it, they feel like they didn't get the joke. Now, of course, it can also add to cognitive load. Now, cognitive load is a fabulous thing in the learning process. And basically what it boils down to is that we can only process a certain amount of information at a time. So you can do one thing at a time. You can sometimes, people say, well, you can't multitask. Well, sure, you can multitask. I can at the same time pick up a bottle that's got some water in it and talk to you. That's 2 tasks. I could pick up these 2 and glance at a phone. There's 3 tasks. Now, the problem is if I start reading something on my phone while you're talking, I can't read and listen to you at the same time because, and what it boils down to, that's too much cognitive load. There's too much demanded of my brain to be listening to you and reading at the same time. However, picking something up and listening to you is not too much cognitive load. Part of it is because of different ways information is processed. Something might be visual versus kinesthetic. And the point is this cognitive load is a really important concept. So if I am telling a joke and you see the connection, it actually helps reduce your cognitive load because now you see a way to process the information. But if you don't know the joke, now it increases your cognitive load because you have to be thinking about what that joke might mean while you're trying to process the content. And if you've ever heard a student say, is this going to be on the test? What can be happening there is the individual's processing all of this material and it's too much cognitive load. So now they're asking, do I have to know that you just said as a joke? Or is that joke or is that piece of anecdotal information you're trying to give them just to help them remember, but if they don't know what it means, you've actually made it harder. If I tell you that it's a good idea to, during a test or something, if you're checking on something for a physical thing, and I say, just push on it about as hard as you would a gas pedal. If you've never driven in your life, I've just increased your cognitive load because now you have to be thinking, how much is that to pressure? What is the gas pedal in terms of how, I wonder how hard you would, and I don't really drive. And so that concept of trying not to add too much, jokes can do that, humor can do that. So you want it to help not add too much cognitive load. It can also make people feel unwelcomed. If we say something that's disparaging against a group, then it's as if we don't want that person there. So we want to be careful with how those things are portrayed. And that's what we have to be really careful with in terms of humor. Now, that's as far as I wanted to get for the formal kind of having some slides and going through that one. So now I need some quick questions for you, or actually responses. So in the Q&A section, if you could please get your buttons ready and click there in Q&A. Number one is, what are some types of humor or directions you've used humor that you have found successful? So if you could jot something down, if somebody's used humor in some way, and as you jot this down, I may very well click on yours and give you the ability to talk. If you don't have a microphone, that's fine. You can just type and say, I don't have a mic. But if you can jot something down, ways you've used humor that's worked well in the past. So Maria put dog and cat memes at the beginning of class before we get started in the day's work. Maria, let me just see if I can find you here. There you are, Maria. If I click on this, do you have a microphone with you, Maria?
I do. Can you hear me, Todd?
I can hear you. So I get a quick question for you before we get rolling with this. So do you bring the memes in, or do you have your students bring them in?
I've done both, actually. So most of the time, though, I've collected them over the years I've asked students to send me their favorite memes. And so I have like a running slideshow just at the beginning before we get started. And then they get excited about it. So they'll send me more, and I just keep it in like a collection.
Oh, that is fabulous. And I really like that, because then the students do feel like they're part of the class, and they're kind of building that cohort model.
Yeah, they seem to enjoy it. And I try to make sure it doesn't, take too long, because it can be distracting if you keep it running for too long. So I kind of keep it short and sweet. But it seemed to work so far.
Oh, that's great. Well, I like that a lot. And I also like the fact that, as we keep teaching, we keep getting a year older every year. And when we have the students come up with these types of things, then, sometimes sometimes they're closer to their classmates' ages than we are. So it works out really well. So, well, thank you, Maria. I really appreciate that. And Austin, there's Austin's right there. I'm going to click yours, Austin. Do you have a microphone with you?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Now, self-deprecating humor. I'd like to mention quickly what you mean by managing the power relationships.
So I teach in the military classroom, and power relationships are very overt in the military, and that's really in opposition to what we want in the classroom. With creating dialogue between students and between the instructor. So what I tend to do is I tend to try to, like you were saying, use moderate self-deprecating humor in order to kind of create a camaraderie and also help balance those power relationships. So if I'm teaching a faculty development class, I might say, by the end of this class, you may think I'm a great instructor right now, but by the end of this class, you're going to realize how terrible I actually am.
That's good. That's good. Wait a minute, you're not terrible though, right? Nope, this is all good.
No, I hope not.
That's good. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's really good. That's perfect. Let's see. Kate, I'm going to come to Kate next here. Kate Elliott. All right, Kate, do you have a microphone? See if you've got it.
I do. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great, Kate. So teaching art history. So these are the memes that can be used kind of just to help, give students the boost while they're taking tests.
Yeah. They'll pop up sometimes in the middle. So art history, we have a slides that they have to identify, right? So as they're coming in, there'll be you can do a kind of meme on the screen as they're filing into the classroom, or sometimes they'll pop up mid-test to sort of give everybody a chuckle and hopefully decrease tension a little bit, because they do get, test anxiety.
Yeah, I particularly like this in tests, and of course it raises the stakes just a little bit, because if we do use humor in a negative way, then it's during a test, which would be terrible. But memes are probably one of the most harmless ways of doing this, as long as again, we're careful which ones we use. But if we could do something to reduce a little bit of stress for an exam, it can have huge huge payoff for the students. So I really like that. So thank you very much. Appreciate that one. Let's try Allison's. My use of humor is more off the cuff. Oh, excellent. So Allison, I'm going to see, I got to find yours. It's Allison. Allison, do you have a microphone with you tonight?
I do.
Oh, and I can hear you just fine. So more like
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. This is great. So to teaching nursing, well, that's a humorous topic. And by the way, isn't it? So it's by itself, it's humorous stuff.
Yes. Yes, of course.
So what kinds of things do you do? I mean, when the stand-up
Yeah.
comedy or stand-up routine kind of things, or when you say stand-up, what does that mean?
So it's not planned. It's like open mic almost. And you know, I think I just have a sense of humor in general, and I always tell my students that, you know, you need to have a sense of humor, especially in nursing, but it's never at the expense of others, ever. Never, ever, ever, ever. Not even myself. But it's just stuff that you sort of have to weave in, maybe just depending on what the topic is. And, you know, for instance, I do like the lower gastrointestinal lecture. So, you know, that one tends to be the week of Thanksgiving. So, you know, I'll make jokes about, it's a good one to know for before Thanksgiving because of all the food you're going to eat, and you can educate your family, you know, just stupid things like that, more like slice of life humor. So, and again, you know, most of the topics, you know, pain, there's just not much humor involved, but again, you know, each cohort that we have, they're first semester nursing students, and you got to read the room. Like the last group I had, they just sort of stared at me, and you know, some people will get some of the jokes and, you know, kind of alluding to like the age thing. I'm 46. I have some students my age. I have some that are 21. They might not get it. So it's really understanding how to read the room.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one too, is just getting the room.
Yeah.
So for reading the room,
Can't hear you. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm trying to think through it because I've run into this before, is it feels like there's stuff that will work semester after semester and you just know they're going to work well. I have one that I use, the Grumpy Cat there. The Grumpy Cat I went through quickly is, you know, what was this? When I die, I want oh gosh, now I'm blocking on the whole thing. Oh yeah, when I die, I'd like my group members to lower me into the grave so they can let me down one last time. So
yes, yep. Yeah, I think I saw that at Lilly conference.
Semester.
And honestly,
Oh, go ahead.
and you know, I sometimes I'll use memes more, not so much to be funny, but to be supportive. So like with Arya and Game of Thrones, that episode had just aired, you know, one of the final episodes. So I was like, you know, you got this, with a picture of Arya, like before the final, like just really, I just try to keep it current, but that means I have to go back each semester and change that slide because it won't be, I try to make it as timely as possible as well. So like last semester I had Baby Yoda in there, you know, from The Mandalorian. So just, you know, some people get it, they do, some they don't, but maybe I'm doing it more for me because it's stuff I like, you know. And then that way they understand me better as a professor, like, oh, she likes Game of Thrones, she likes Star Wars. So yeah. It's an interesting way to connect with your students or tell them almost more about yourself. So
yes, and that's where it really helps to humanize a person, because then they understand you watch TV. I mean, I still remember the very first time when I started teaching and I was in the grocery store and two students walked by and I'm pushing a grocery cart and there's toilet paper in there and they start giggling and looking and it's like, yep, wipe my butt too. So, I mean, it's a quick statement, but the concept of they don't see you as a human. And then, so sometimes you talk about television programs and stuff, you're more humanizing. So I like that. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Great. Thank you. Sure. Let's try Melody. Melody here, you had down listed that you teach advanced ESL, which is great. And let's see, use cartoons to explain various types of humor mechanisms. And so I was wondering if maybe you could give an example or just chat a little bit. Do you have your microphone tonight? There we go. Does that work, Melody? that you? Oh, is that
Nope.
still
Oh,
Alice?
do I have to?
Oh, Allison, I don't think there you go. I got muted now. All right, Melanie may not have a mic hooked up here, so let me switch over here to Susan's, our last one. Susan, let's see if you got your mic here. Oops.
I have a
there
mic.
you go, Susan. Excellent. All right, so let's see.
So it never fails, the self-deprecating humor. Whenever I don't get a laugh, I say it's because my husband says I'm not funny, and they always laugh at that.
That's
So, and it's been very hard, I think, to teach this semester remotely because they all have their black screens, and it's very hard because you can't read the room.
Yes.
And I think that one of the other speakers said that reading the room is really important. It's very hard to do it remotely when they all shut their cameras off.
That is hard. And of course, oftentimes they'll shut the cameras off because it helps with the bandwidth and stuff, but it is hard. But I do like the joke. And I mean, again, if it works all the time, that's good. There was one that
It always works, always.
Just always. I have one I used for years, and I was talking about my 3 daughters, and I'd say, my oldest daughter is 12 years old, and I can't talk to her because she's a teenager. My middle daughter is 4 years old, and she's like by far my favorite. And my youngest is 2, and I'm pretty sure she's going to end up in prison, so I'm trying not to get attached. See, there it goes. Always laughter. And I would stop, and then I would say, wait a minute, why in the world would you people find that funny? And I just said, I'm trying not to get attached to my youngest daughter. And almost invariably, somebody would be laughing, and they'd stop, and they'd say, because it's true. And I said, well, what do you mean it's true? And she said, well, not trying not to get attached, but you know, if you have 3 kids, if a police officer knocks the door and says, one of your children's in trouble, you know which one it is. So that concept of people find this funny. And so sometimes I'm not even sure why they find things funny, but we do stumble onto them. So I hadn't tried the one of saying my wife doesn't think I'm funny, but I may have to try that one. So I appreciate that. All right, so thank you all for everyone who's participated. I really appreciate the participation, and you had lots of really good examples. Now, we try to end this thing at 8:45, which means we got a little over 10 minutes we can do. Anybody want to participate for a minute and just give examples of humor that it's not humor you tried and failed? It could be if you'd like, but just humor that you know of, or from experience, whatever you want to call it, from what you've witnessed, just is not a good idea, or things that haven't gone well. If you could maybe in the questions and answers, I'm just going to pause a minute and see if there's anything for not going well. I see actually a hand up, so I'm going to try this one. And this is for Austin. Unmute in Austin. Were you?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Austin.
Okay, probably the worst story I have about humor not working is I had my students do 15-minute informal presentations, and I had an Eagle Scout that decided to do one based on the Scout's Guide to Surviving the Zombie Apocalypse. So we used a clip from that from YouTube. Well, he was trying to be funny by using the clip, but he didn't watch the entire clip. And somehow, it's the first time that I've ever seen a clip from YouTube that had bare breasts on it. And so in the middle of his briefing, there were bare breasts in the middle of my class, and it brought the entire class to a screeching halt. So I would definitely say go over your students' material, make sure that they go over it before they try to be funny.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that one. And it's interesting the number of people who will do things and not actually look at the whole thing first. And so not only, I mean, okay, I'll admit this one. Early in my career, very early in my career, I showed a video and I watched the first half of it and I thought it was a fascinating, fabulous video. And I stopped watching it about halfway through, and this wasn't humor, but it was one that I didn't preview, that concept. And then when I showed it in class, we were halfway through when it just went bad. Just about the time that I had turned it off, which was odd. But then you're stuck with this whole situation of what do you do? Because you're the one who picked that. In humor, it's even worse. So definitely preview all the time. Melanie, I see your hands up here, so I'm going to click on yours now. Let's see what's going on. Oops. Oh no, we can't hear. Not sure. We're having trouble with the microphone. All right, I'm gonna try. We'll leave that for just 1 second while we go over here to Bill. Oh. Oh, interesting. All right, I'm gonna try Bill. Let's try to turn this on for a second. Bill, so let's see if we can chat real fast. You got your microphone, Bill?
I do.
Oh, excellent. So the issue, first of all, is microeconomics. It's a hilarious topic, Bill. This is so much fun.
Unemployment rates.
All right, so that's a sad one, but okay. Yeah, all right, that's a good point. All right, so comment on something that says in class where I myself and a foil. Oh, interesting. So if you need if you need somebody to kind of play with you, so to speak, is that what you're thinking?
Yes. In meetings, I'm funny. I'll comment upon what someone else says, but in class, I don't have someone to play against.
That's interesting. So have you tried having students find jokes and memes and things about microeconomics? Is that something you've tried yet?
I have not, no.
Yeah, so one thing I would suggest is just make it an assignment for students, or tell students, go out and look for them, because yes, unemployment rates are not funny, but there's a lot of things in microeconomics. I mean, there's lots of areas where, especially with plays on words, always blocking when I get into something like this one here. So I don't have any off the top of my head. If anyone has a really good microeconomics joke, we'll need it in a minute here. But the concept of, if the students can do it, when the students bring in jokes with you and your expertise, then you could actually play off from their jokes. And that might give you something to play with then.
Okay.
Yeah, I would suggest that one. That's anybody else have any suggestions on that, or Bill? Y'all good?
Something in the Q&A.
All right. So try that one first. See if you can get your students to come up with some, and then you can play off from their jokes. That will create the foil. And the fact that they're bringing jokes puts you in a really nice situation for being able to do that. All right. All right, so I'm gonna move on here. Let's see. Looked at humor in text. Melody, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let me try the talking here. We'll try it again. We have tried the chatting. Can you be a little more descriptive of what you mean by the humor in text? Not sure.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can, Melody. That's perfect.
I switched devices.
Oh, that did it. Perfect.
Okay, so I guess I'm like Allison. I like to think that I'm fairly funny in class, and for me, it's just witticisms and that. And I've always been very careful because I do teach a multicultural group as a rule, and yet I do manage to get my students to laugh, which is kind of cool. But
yeah,
that's the classroom, and I think we're all talking about what we do in the classroom. For 10 years, I have been doing research on the value of humor in academic text. Does it actually facilitate learning if we use any kind of humorous tone in our academic textbooks?
okay.
And okay, so do you follow me? So it's simply,
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, there's been research done on, like, say, jokes and cartoons and so forth. But what I've been looking at is just the odd sarcastic remark, something like, and then if this particular economic formula happens, blah, 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 and then it'll say in parentheses, we hope, right?
Right.
Small things like that. Do those small details that, no instructor ever looks at in a class and says, oh, did you get the humor on page 48? As a textbook writer, it's very interesting to know if those sorts of things are happening. So I've done a lot of empirical research. I've worked on about 800 students here. I teach at Quantum Polytechnic University in the Vancouver area of Canada.
Okay.
And I'm kind of afraid to tell the group, but it would appear that generally speaking, the answer is no. It doesn't facilitate learning. I've done reading tests and different sorts of questions, different sorts of mechanisms, and so forth. Although there was nothing substantially significant, but there was a small hint that possibly detail retention is a little bit better, and that actually is almost common sense, right? That if you're trying to get students to remember details, you would make it somehow a little bit more impactful. Okay, so that's just what I wanted to share.
No, that's really good. Well, I really appreciate that, Melody. And so for interest level, though, it doesn't demonstrate any value in terms of helping the students with respect to the interest in reading?
I have not touched on affective factors yet. I simply wanted to look at actual production and test scores to see if it, did it help with retaining the main idea, comprehension of main idea better? Did it help with inferencing better? Those sorts of more global concept type things, there was really no difference. Because what I've done is two separate readings, one with very neutral tone and one with what you might call a little bit more engaging tone. And then the students would read that and then answer questions. And the only place where we found any marginal difference in scores was on detail retention, accuracy of answering the detailed questions.
Excellent. Okay, well, that's really important to know, though. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm curious about, and of course there's so many different types of humor and everything else. I will say this funny from my own anecdotal information or my own anecdotal experience is that, the editor's notes that are put in books, or not put in books, but editor's notes you have. And
Right.
we had a development book one time, and the author left the editor's notes in and then his answers to them. So as we were reading through, it was hilarious because it would be things like, I don't think the readers are going to understand this. And then the author actually would write below that is, actually, I think I've got a pretty good handle on this and they will understand it. I'm going to leave it. And then down a little bit later, it'd say, you said that there were going to be 4 points, but you only listed 3. And the author would list, darn, I can't believe I missed one. And then there would be one inserted. But I found it hilarious and fun to read through looking for all those. But I have to say, again, anecdotally, I don't know that that helped me understand the text better. It was just
Right.
enjoyable for me. So I
Yes,
like this
yes.
concept. And they've done, studies where people have looked at TED Talks versus faculty members presenting the same material, and students think, ooh, they learned so much more from the TED Talk than an unpracticed person. When I say faculty member, a person who hasn't been like post-produced and it looked all this great, where people think they learn more, but they actually don't. So this is important research to look at. I thank you for sharing that. So thanks, Melody, appreciate that. Oh my goodness, I just looked up and we're out of time here. It's 8:45. So let me just wrap up with this. There's so many different ways that we can do humor in the classroom for things like attention and de-stressing a little bit, taking out anxiety, helping build cohorts, in-group kind of feeling like you're part of the groups. There's lots of good ways to use it. But I also want to be really, really careful, again, pointing out that we don't want to make people feel excluded. We want to be very careful that we're not creating stress and creating issues. And so I thought the topic would be fun to look at. There's lots of stuff out there about humor and use in the classroom situation. You certainly can have my slides if you'd like those. I'm leaving it also with what Melody had pointed out, is sometimes the relationship is not as strong as we would like to think that it is. Big one for me has always been attention. And especially in the classroom with that research that shows that at least students will indicate they're much more interested if there's a little bit of humor here and there. And there's no doubt that when we get more animated, some humor, but actually just that energy that's there. We do know about social contagion. Social contagion is if I show more energy and affective responses to things, you're more likely to also have more energy. It wouldn't take very long if I sit here and as we're wrapping up, I said, and thank you so much for today. We're going to be talking about humor in the classroom. And There are several areas that we would like to look at. And the first of like 22 areas is, again, that would be really hard for me to stay with. And so I want somebody to be animated. I want a little bit of humor, and it helps me for my energy level and my interest level. So anyway, hope there was something you picked up along the way that was some value there. I hope you had your beverage and you were able to sip a little and just spend a little bit of time thinking about some humor stuff. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again in another one in the future. As we're wrapping up, if anybody has any quick comments, you can, but otherwise, thank you for coming. Look forward to seeing you in the future.